everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. What? Coming to you from my O2 here in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. I got another stop at 0100 over towards Allentown. I'm kind of doing a 7-3 split here. I got a little bit of time before I hit 7, so I'm gonna make this time count. So today, September 11th, a lot of interesting things happened on September 11th. In 1777, General William Howe, the British general, defeated the colonial army at Brandywine in Delaware. And then, as repayment, on this date in 1814, U.S. Navy Captain Thomas McDonough defeated a superior British naval force on Lake Champlain up in New York. Lake Champlain is between New York and Vermont. It's a beautiful area, but McDonough, I talked about him before because when I was in McDonough, Georgia one time, I was like, hey, this town is actually named after McDonough. By the way, Georgia's got a lot of weird, not that this is totally weird, but I was in a town, like, it's named after Lord Byron, which is like really, really random that a town in Georgia that wasn't even around until after the Civil War is named after this British romantic poet. But anyway, McDonough, Georgia is named after Thomas McDonough. But the funny thing is that McDonough, Georgia is not actually spelled the way McDonough spelled his name. McDonough, the captain, spelled his name M-A-C, capital D. McDonough, Georgia is just M-C. On this date in 1941, so this is kind of an interesting, historical tidbit. On this date in 1941, the Pentagon was started. They started building the Pentagon over in Arlington, Virginia. I guess I don't know if it still is the world's largest office building, but it's definitely one of the largest. On this date in 1967, little nostalgia here from when I was a kid. 1967, on this date, the Carol Burnett Show began, and it's still, I think you could still get it on, TV Land or whatever. I just remember that show every Saturday night. We always watched it. Sketch comedy. It was there's some pretty funny stuff that was on there, even if you're not an old person like me. On this date in 1967, Harry Connick Jr. was born, and then 10 years later in 1977 on this date, Ludacris was born. Of course, everybody's talking about September 11th, 2001. I guess as well they should. But what's interesting is I've mentioned the book, and I was thinking about this last night, the book 102 Minutes by Jim Dwyer. I highly recommend that book. It is, even if you think you know a lot about 9/11 or, whatever, it's really interesting. It's just a very great read, and it's a page turner, and it's it's very granular at some levels, talking about building construction, but also just the individual lives of people that lived and died, what they were doing in the moment, and it's really, really well done. I strongly recommend you read it. 102 minutes, which, by the way, is the time that lapsed from when Tower Number 1 was hit until Tower Number 1 fell. Because remember, Tower 2 was hit last but fell first. And Dwyer goes into why that was the case. Why did Tower 1 stand longer than Tower 2? And speaking of Tower 2, I was watching some video, and it still is pretty impactful to watch some of these videos on YouTube. And I was watching this video I'd never seen before, and it's this dude that just has like a camcorder, right? And he must be a young guy, because like he goes up on a roof, and then his friends start coming up, and they're wigging out, and some people are on their cell phones and stuff. But the interesting thing about it is he has a direct line of sight to the World Trade Center, and he's videoing different things, and people that have fallen, and by the way, like in Dwyer's book, he talks about the people that fell to the ground, and Dwyer's book is kind of painful because it talks about reality and not assumption, right? And like he talks about people that fell out of the tower, but as he mentions, sometimes they were probably pushed, not pushed like I'm shoving you out, but because there was such a crush of people trying to get clean air, and because the tower had very narrow windows. And he said, you have 10 people trying to get in one little space to get air, and they're panicked. And when people are panicked, just like when somebody's drowning, they're, the adrenaline and their fear kind of takes over. So it wouldn't be hard to imagine that's the person that's at the front of the window, especially because these windows in the Trade Center, the two towers were like floor to ceiling. So somebody standing there but has 5-6 people pushing to get air, it's very possible that people were inadvertently shoved out of the tower. But anyway, getting back to this guy's video, what's really interesting to me, and this phenomena has been proved by psychologists and stuff over the years, but people can see stuff and in the moment not realize exactly what has happened. That's why eyewitness testimony is suspect in criminal cases. Like lawyers, especially prosecutors, would be like, hey, we have this eyewitness that puts you at the scene. And it's like, yeah, so what, right? Eyewitness testimony is faulty a lot of the time. But here's what happened in this video, and I apologize, I don't have a link to it, but so he's outside on a rooftop, absolutely unimpeded view of at least the top 50 floors of both towers, right? He's watching the tower, and like right before that, somebody says, oh, the news is saying a plane hit the tower, and they can't get their heads around the fact that there's so much damage, right? But because papers, just like I said, stuff's flying everywhere, pouring out of the building, black smoke. So tower number 2 gets hit, but he turns and looks at it with the camera, at least, at slightly after the point of impact. So by the time he turns the camera, there's this huge fireball shooting out of it. And he's like, that was no plane, and there are myriad videos of that second 767 hitting Tower 2, right? But he thinks because the plane is already disintegrated, because he literally turned a second too late. there's this enormous explosion, an enormous fireball, and he's like, that wasn't a plane, that was a freaking explosion, you know, like a bomb went off, right? Well, of course, we know it was a plane, but that's, you know, that's a very interesting illustration right on video of somebody being present. And you know, I'm sure that guy would have testified until he saw the other videos later that day. I'm sure he would have testified in a court of law that it was an explosion and not a plane. And the thing is, like, when the Pentagon got hit, right, I heard a news report, but I honestly I couldn't get my head around an airliner as big as a 757, which is what hit the Pentagon and what plowed into the ground out here in Pennsylvania. But I couldn't get my head around a plane getting low enough to hit the Pentagon, because the Pentagon's not a very tall building. It's like 5 stories basically. But anyway, I just share that because a lot of times our minds play tricks on us. And that's one of the great reasons to not make a statement if you've been in an accident, especially if you have a dash cam. You know, if you have a dash cam, just say, you know, and you can qualify, right? Like, the cops are going to ask you, or other people are going to ask you. First of all, if the cops ask you, you don't have to really say much, but be very ambiguous, be very general. Say, well, I think what might have happened is X, because you don't want to give a statement and be all like, oh yeah, that's definitely what happened, and then turn out that the video contradicts you. Because then if you have to be a witness in a court proceeding, it's going to, you know, it's going to hurt your credibility. So anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about is I got like 35,000 miles on my Peterbilt 579. And somebody was asking me, okay, which do you like better, Freightliner or Peterbilt? So let me just say this at the outset. This truck rides better, maybe even substantially better than the Freightliner I had. However, so let me just tell you all the things that I think are better than the Freightliner. So it's more roomy. It rides better. You know, it's more comfortable. I added, you know, the front airbags on the front axle. My APU works better, but again, that's not really the truck. The engine is more torquey, for lack of a better term, and it seems to have more power. The you know, and there's some convenience features that are they're good, and you know, I think it's a good looking truck. You know, it does its job. Having said all that, and let me preface this by saying, hey, I'm riding this horse till it dies. You know, I mean, I'm not gonna like get rid of it unless something, you know, horrible happens where I can't, where it just doesn't run. But a lot of the stuff, I will say this. I'd always been told that Peterbilt was like the gold standard of trucks. And I don't know that Peterbilt has done anything to dispel that. But having an engine that's more powerful, well, that could just happen, right? It's just a different engine. And having a truck that rides better, well, we kind of know why that is, right? Like, it's got a longer wheelbase. The suspension is actually set up different. Why are you barking at that guy going by on the pallet jack? He's just doing his job. But you know, those are things like I can identify why those things are the way they are. But here's the deal. I'm disappointed at what I would call the fit and finish of this thing. And just like if I would be disappointed if I bought a BMW and found that it was just a bunch of cheap plastic crap, just like, you know, a Chevy would be or whatever. And so let me just start by saying that while the cab itself is more spacious, Peterbilt interior design folks have done a really poor job with storage. And to give you an example, you know, it's a truck, right? It's a vehicle. I don't need a lot of headroom above where I sit because I can't stand up here anyway. It's not like I stand up in front, you know, right behind the steering wheel or, you know, in front of the passenger seat. But yet they have all this room above me that's wasted. And then they have these tiny little compartments that do not have covers on them that, you know, compared to the Freightliner, basically glove boxes that I had above both seats, this is woefully inadequate. The side compartments up here, I feel like a flight attendant, much smaller than the ones I had on my Freightliners. The back compartments, you know, again, not as spacious. And, you know, while I enjoy a bigger bunk, I don't need a bigger bunk, but I do need storage space. And, you know, that's really one disappointment that I have. Another disappointment that I have, the electronics suite that I have laid out in front of me. It has already quit working properly. I already don't get the speed of vehicles in front of me or how many seconds behind them I am. I also feel like the Freightliner data is more user-friendly. Now, let me say this. The latest model Freightliner I've ever driven was a 21 at GP Transco. That was the year before they started going to the digital dash. So maybe people that have, say, a 24 Freightliner, so we're kind of doing apples to apples here, because this is a 24 Pete, can share with me, you know, whether they like that digital dash on the Freightliner. But let me say, and I've said this before, all these switches, not user-friendly. I can't, the flashers are on the bottom row next to the key, where the key goes in. That's a stupid place for the flashers, considering that you use them a lot and you want to be able to get to that quick. A lot of times I inadvertently turn the top row on, which is the cab lights, the front of the cabin lights, front of the cab lights. A lot of these buttons are blocked by the fact, now this isn't Peterbilt's problem per se, but they're so far away that you really have to divert your attention. Most of them I wouldn't use while I'm driving down the highway, but you really have to turn your head to see them. The other problem is that this stupid ass Qualcomm is on this freaking arm that blocks the entrance to getting out of the, you know, moving over to the passenger side, because instead of putting it here on the dash, like right, you know, almost to the right of where the steering column is, they didn't put it there because there's this big electronic screen that Peterbilt decided to put in there that is basically useless. Like, there's all these different options on it, and to me it's basically useless. The nav that Peterbilt put in here is laughable. I mean, I don't like most navs, But the fact that this, gold standard company in a 2024 truck put a nav system in here. So like, and I know people are like, oh, well, you could go to the dealership and get updates. Well, guess what? I don't want to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. It's a brand new truck, right? And there are so many roads that it doesn't even know exist. I went through a traffic circle last night, and it didn't know there was a traffic circle there. And, you say, well, that might be new. Yeah, it is new, but it's not as new as this frickin' truck. There's a whole bunch of stuff that this truck doesn't know. And then it wanted me to go down a road that I know for a fact is restricted, has a 10-ton limit restriction on it. This truck by itself, without a trailer on it, right, by itself weighs almost 10 tons. Why the hell would, the nav is useless. I mean, unless you want to look at something colorful. The clocks on the nav, or the clocks on this electronic display and the dash, they're not synced to each other. So when you change time zones, one of them, and it varies, right? One of them will change to the correct time for the time zone you're in, and the other won't. And in fact, the one, I think it was on the electronic display, it took like I was way the crap. I mean, way, like over, like I was in like Oklahoma, and until I stopped for quite a while, it did not change to the central time zone. Like all the way across Missouri, and yeah, it didn't change. Again, I really don't know who at Peterbilt is responsible for that stuff, but I just don't care for it. This truck, I don't really like how the cruise is set up, how it interacts with the Jake brake. But one thing I will say is it is worse than the Freightliner when it comes to seeing shadows and slamming on the brakes, right? Because this won't even give you a warning. It won't even say that there's something in front of you. It'll just slam on the brakes. And I think it was in last night, I was driving through, no, I take it back, yesterday during the day, I was driving through Indianapolis, and 70 kind of curves a few places, and I was in a lane by myself, and some vehicle that was to the right of me, but we're on a left-hand curve, it sees that vehicle. What's it do? In 55 mile an hour traffic, just slams on the brakes with no warning to me. I don't like that. It's a flawed system. They still have never, and when I say they, I don't know if Peterbilt builds it, but I know I had problems on Internationals, the same thing. They still haven't gotten it right. And that's why I'm not really worried about autonomous trucks. I mean, like the autonomous cabs that are, in San Francisco, you can stop them with a traffic cone. But it's just irksome, and it gets to the point where I run with the cruise off if anybody is around me, or the road curves, because you don't want to be going into a construction zone and just have the brakes slam on when you're not expecting it. It is very dangerous, because if that happens on icy pavement, or which I try not to drive on, but if it's snowing, if it's raining, if you're on a road that has gravel that's been spilled on it, that's the last thing you want, is the brakes slamming on. So I don't care for that stuff. I much prefer something simpler that works. Like I said, the people that thought about this interior, they must not be truck drivers. And the other thing, when I was talking about fit and finish, like on the back here, I have I don't know what you call them, the air air things that hang down on the side of the truck. Like the back one on the driver's side, where, you know, back where you go to the catwalk, it's the fastener just fell out. It's just hanging, right? The front, I've actually popped it back in several times, but it looks like I hit something, which it may have bottomed out, but I didn't like run over anybody or anything, and it's all popped out just from vibration and stuff. And you know, those are little things that you'd think the gold standard of trucks they would have anticipated and made sure didn't happen. So it's, I would have to say that, you know, I'm glad I'm not buying it. I don't care about, you know, people talk about, oh, they have better resale value. I'm not sure why, other than, you know, somebody wants a truck that's more comfortable, or they think it's prestigious. But like anything else, right, it gets really pedestrian when they relax their standards. And I mean, if you think about it, right, like KW and Peterbilt used to be competitors, and maybe they technically still are, but PACCAR is just trying to do things as cheaply as possible, and it shows in this truck. You know, I'm just not wowed. Oh, and by the way, like these stock things that you have on either side, you know, people have talked about the transmission side stock, which is on the right hand side. Mine has already malfunctioned slightly a couple of times, where I was pressing the brake, trying to put it in drive, it wouldn't go into drive. I have not had it drop like into neutral while I'm in drive, but it's concerning. And it's concerning because they've had this problem for years now. But also with the windshield wipers, like a couple of times I've turned on the windshield wipers, they just wouldn't come on. And then like the windshield washer, the little like white stuff that's on this black stock here, it's already rubbed off. I mean, I don't even use the windshield washers that much, right? And it's not like I've been driving around, you know, Seattle in the winter where I'm using the wipers all the time anyway. But it's already like almost completely gone. Like, again, fit and finish. It's just not, it's very average. It is very average. So if you want a Peterbilt, you know, get one. But know this, you're gonna get a truck that's more comfortable. And I like some of the options, but I'm not sure I couldn't have gotten the options on another model. But I'm just underwhelmed. I mean, I've had nice vehicles, I've had crappy vehicles. You know, like I used to drive a Ford Taurus that I bought from a used car lot in Arizona. You know, I didn't expect much from that car, but then when I had a Mercedes S-Class, you know, I expected a lot. When I had a Lexus, I expected a lot. When I had my Honda Civic, I didn't expect as much. But yeah, I will say, and by the way, like Prime, when they put like the scale for the for the drive axles, I can't even see it. Like right now, I can't, I have to, they put it down here. It's basically straight across from my knee. So if I had eyeballs in my right knee, I could see it pretty well. But other than that, I have to basically like turn my body to see it. Again, I shouldn't have to do that with any gauge, but I do. And then they put the tire pressure monitor system up here in this little useless cubby thing. But of course it rattled, so I've already stuffed napkins under it. So do I hate the truck? No. Am I going to get rid of it? No, unless, like I said, something crazy happens. But am I impressed with it? Am I like, ooh, wow, that's really cool? No. I'm disappointed that they didn't do a better job. So like I said, you know, Freightliners, you know, by the way, this truck isn't bad to turn or park. I haven't had a lot of issues with that. It's got a pretty good turning radius, even though it's got a longer wheelbase. But you know, if money is definitely an issue, I think the Freightliner is more useful. It's a more useful truck. You know, this truck doesn't have you know, a lot of features that are important to me, and it's missing things that are important to me. What? So anyway, B, I don't know. What do you think of this truck? Do you like the leather seats? She likes the bigger bed. That just gives her more room to stretch out, even though she's not a big dog. She acts like she's like a horse or something. Anyway, so I don't, you know, and by the way, I know some people will be like, well, you could do this or you could do that, you could get it updated. I don't want that, right? Like that, to me, I know how to drive a truck. I've driven a lot of different models. I should be able to get in a truck and say, yeah, this is useful to me. Like all these buttons that are like, it's so dumb. It's like there's all these blanks. It's like, hey, by the way, you didn't get everything you could have, because otherwise these buttons would all have pictures on them. I mean, it's just kind of stupid. And yeah, it's like there are blank buttons closer to me than there are buttons with stuff on them. It's just bizarre. But anyway, enough, I guess, complaining or whatever. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.